What's up, everybody? I'm Jay Miller, and I am a developer advocate, but moreover, I am also a contributor to the conference community where I often do transcriptions for podcasters, YouTubers, and this year jumped into helping with virtual conferences. And as a Python developer, one of the things that I see a lot is that the content creation around podcasting, around course creation, around YouTube, they all tend to lack in the area of transcriptions. This talk is really going to explain how I not only transcribed this exact talk, so we're getting a little meta, but also how I transcribed the talks for the entire Pi Gotham 2020 project. And thank you to the Pi Gotham team, one for giving me material to use, but also for letting me talk and let me talk about it. So I'm going to start this off by saying, yes, if you are creating content, you do need transcriptions. Now, I understand that for a lot of people, transcriptions can be used as an SEO tool. That's not the only place. In fact, you can use transcriptions for a lot of different things. I know of content creators that record their initial thoughts and then they transcribe them and then they edit them and then they re-record the video. That way they can stay on topic. They can then create slide decks that focus solely on the thing that they are wanting to talk about now that it's been cleaned up and edited down. I know of people who are instructors that use transcriptions to impact how they help their students by not only giving them video content, but also the written content to go along with it. And ultimately, as someone who struggles with ADHD, I personally use transcriptions all the time to help focus when I'm listening to a conference talk or trying to consume some type of learning resource. So if you're creating any type of content that involves audio or video, I would highly encourage you to use transcriptions. And I know what you're going to say. They're expensive. Yes, they can be. But I'm hoping by the end of this, I'm going to show you that they're not only not that expensive, but they're also pretty easy to do. However, this talk is called Getting Better Transcriptions. So I'm going to also leave you with a couple of tips that are going to allow you to make your transcriptions even better. And then I might even share a little bit on how I'm working on doing that myself. So let's just jump right in. The first question was how did I generate transcriptions for Pi Gotham? Well, let's jump over here. The first thing that I did was I used this little tool that I made called Transcriptor. It is a Python wrapper around Bodo 3. So if you're familiar with the Bodo package, that is the AWS Python package. Now, Bodo 3, for many reasons, can sometimes be a little complicated when you're using it. This was designed to give you an object-oriented approach around the idea of a job. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes when I show you some of the tools that I use to make this pretty easy using Transcriptor. So let's jump over, and inside of here, I'm already in the folder. As you can see, I have a few folders here. If I list out the videos, you'll see there are videos for all of these talks currently. And these aren't just the video content. This is a bunch of video content and some other things. So the first thing that I have to do is I have to identify what is the final video that I'm going to use. What is the final video content that I'm pulling from to do these transcriptions? And I won't bore you with that. That involves doing some searching, some opening, and some toying around with things to figure it out. Once I've got it figured out, The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to convert them all to audio, which is why there was an audio folder. So as you can see, we're still missing a few of these talks. I'm recording this right around the deadline, so not all the talks are here yet. But we can see we have a large list of talks that we can present. So after this, the next step is to upload all of these audio files to S3 and then start the transcription process. Now, normally what you would have to do, if I switch back over to the browser, okay, so the first thing that we would have to do normally in that instance is upload things to S3, and we would do that using the Bodo 3 S3 upload file, or sorry, S3 client upload file object, which, that's it's not too bad. It's not a big deal to do that. And even for all of these, it's not a big deal. But after we upload it, then we need to also store the key for that file. And then we need to then do a transcription job, which looks a lot like this. Let's go to our transcribe service and then start transcription job. And I don't want to bore you with all the details. Basically, you're going to need a job name, a language code. You don't need Hertz. You don't need the media format. It'll auto detect. And then the path to your media file. The settings are optional. There's a bunch of things in there that I could explain. You might want to do a vocabulary. We'll talk about that a little bit later. You probably want to do speaker labels if you have more than one speaker. AWS supports up to 10 speakers. You can do channel diarization, which is the channel identification thing, which basically says speaker 1 is on the left channel, speaker 2 is on the right channel. You can have multiple alternatives, or you can just have the one actual object. And I will explain a lot of these things in a second. But ultimately, you're going to run the start transcription job. You're going to wait. And then when you're done, you're going to get a job object that you then have to manipulate into some type of transcription file. Now, we haven't even covered what transcription files look like. So a transcription file can usually be one of a few formats. We're going to talk about two in particular. We're going to talk about the SRT format, and we're going to talk about just your generic text file. And the reason I'm talking about those is because those are the ones that I use. Your text file is simple. You create the format, you create the text. Your Amazon job information, the actual content, the words, will give you time of when a word was said and if you enabled speakers, who said it. So you then have to play around with some Python to make that work. So the other format is an SRT format, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. Let's see here. Let's jump over back into this. So as you can see here, this is already bad. It's already bad. This is the original right out of AWS Transcribe. As you can see, they messed up Anastasia's name. My name is, they say in the station. That's not right. It's Anastasia, so I'd have to go in and correct that. There are a lot of individual things here. She mentions Pi Berlin. Pi Berlin is wrong. I would do a series of ads and corrections and fixes to get all of this working properly. But you can look at this and tell this is not great. But what are we looking at? Ultimately, we're looking at these three lines here. I want to, and not the three in these times, but ultimately this format. Everything will follow this format. It'll follow a index number, your start time and your stop time in hours, minutes, seconds, milliseconds, and then it'll have the content that you want to exist within that time. Now, SRT is a great format when it comes to working with video. Let's jump in here. I have this transcript.py. If we view this, you can see I'm using transcriptor, and then I have a custom job type for working with Amazon jobs called Amazon Job. And then I'm also using Typer. For those that don't know, Typer is a fast way to create command line scripts or command line apps. It's built off of Click, which is an amazing tool that's built by the Palettes team. If you want to create something and you don't want to add a lot of complexity to your code, you just want to add some simple entrances into your Python script, Typer is kind of the way to go, in my opinion. But as you can see, we have a few commands here. We have start transcription here. We have this output SRT, and then we have this make SRT files. And then we have a couple of other ones. We have some check stuff that we're not really going to be doing too much with. Those first three are the ones that we really use. I use this script for one-off projects as well as these bulk projects like the PyGotham conference. So if I were to start the transcription, I don't want to just start the transcription. I want to do it for the entire directory that I have. And it's simple. Just iterate through the directory. I'm using the recursive glob here for all the MP3 files. And then when I give it the directory path, I would just give it that audio directory that I mentioned earlier. And then I'm going to say Amazon job. The file path is the file path that we're currently on. The bucket is whatever bucket I've assigned, which is up here. And then we're going to start. We're going to run start. So that's it. All that does is upload the file to S3 using Bodo upload file and then start transcription job. Now, if I could give it more information, if I knew the language for each one, for instance, if I were transcribing a conference in Spanish, which I don't speak Spanish, please don't send me transcriptions in Spanish. I will do a terrible job with them and I want to do a good job. But I could change the language just by saying, language equals whatever the language is. And transcriptor will do that in the background. It'll say, hey, language is a command that I understand. Let me add that to the transcription job. So once that's done, again, transcriptions take time, but once that's done, then I would output the SRT file. And as I mentioned before, it's not just a object that you get. The actual object that you get from Amazon S3, this, it has a transcription in it, but if you can tell, that's just text. That's not actual updated content. And it doesn't have the speakers. It doesn't have the timestamps. That was something that we talked about having earlier. Now, I'm not going to stretch this out too long, but I wanted to get over to here to where you can see these items called alternatives. Effectively, the way that transcription works is that you can, let me throw my face on here so that you can actually see me. The way that transcriptions work is you have this word that AWS Transcribe thinks that it heard. And this is called an alternative. Now, depending on what your settings are, you could have more than one alternative. You can have, 3 or 4 alternatives. You set whatever the max number of alternatives you want, and it will give you up to that amount. Now, it will ask you, it'll tell you what it thinks it heard and how confident it is that it heard what it thought it heard. So here you see the content was by, B-Y, and the confidence level is 0.7. From what I can tell, 0.7 is actually, it's not great, but it's not terrible either. There are definitely worse choices there. As you can see, curiously is a 0.38. Punctuation it just kind of throws all willy-nilly. It doesn't really know how to do punctuation, and it even tells you this because it won't give you a confidence on punctuation. It'll just say, hey, this is punctuation. Let's see. Content is a comma, punctuation is the type, and the confidence is 0. So, how do we use this? Well, we can look at how confident certain words are, and we can take the most confident in that time spectrum. And that's what Transcriptor does. Is it looks at it, it goes, hey, you gave me a few options. This is the most confident. I'm going to select this one. Now, if you need to change that, you just change it in the file, or you can just remove the previous marker and then, or just adjust the confidence level. This is why I wanted to do this, because Transcriptor treats everything as it's an object. So you don't just have raw JSON. You now have an object that can be iterated through. You have a list of alternative objects that each have their own confidence, their own content. If you want to change the confidence of 1 to equal 1, or if you want to change it from 1 to equal 0, you can do that. And then you can regenerate your SRT right then and there. If you want to time shift everything, if you want to say, hey, there's going to be an intro video that's 5 seconds long, so I need to shift all of the alternatives by 5 seconds, you can do that because the start times are all time deltas. They're all in seconds and milliseconds, so you can just say time delta, or start time is plus equal 5, end time is plus equal 5. So obviously we have this transcription file. We don't want that. We want an SRT file. And that's what this output.srt does. All it does is, and it's the same exact process, is that I can iterate through a directory. It's going to look at each of those files, and for all the files in it, it's going to create an Amazon job, and it's going to build it. Now, all building is doing is taking the JSON that we had and creating all of the markers, alternatives, all the content that we wanted so that we can generate output from it. Now, once you call build, you can just say, hey, if the output's a directory, then output things to the directory with the SRT. And we're going to write to that output job.srt. And that's the important part, is that the .srt is going to tell it how to build out that file. I think we can actually even take a look at it here. Let's quit this, and then we'll just open up Transcriptor. So we create an SRT file, and we give it, we pass in that property. We're saying, okay, create this separator, take this text, enumerate through the markers, start at 1. That's going to build that index. So the markers are going to be whatever the most confident alternative is. From there, it can say, okay, even if your index is all jacked up down the road, it's going to ignore that. It's going to create its own. Then you have your time deltas, which it fills in. You can adjust. Well, we have it so it's adjusting everything into microseconds. Now, the next step there is to append all of this to our file. And that's what this is. This is literally just index, start time, end time, text, as we mentioned in the document that we were looking at, which was here. We have the index, start time, end time, text. And that's it. That's all that it takes to generate this. It iterates through all of the markers and creates this format so that you don't have to. Now, I know that I've basically been pitching you on this product that, as you've even seen, Yes, it makes making the transcription easier, but it doesn't make the quality of the transcription better. And that's going to be one of the things that I will need your help with. So, how do we truly make transcriptions better for developers? The first thing that we need to do is we need to understand what's available to us already. And those are two different things. We have the transcription list, or sorry, the vocabulary list and the vocabulary table. A vocabulary list is simply just a list of phrases that we want the system to recognize with some bias. We want it to be given advantage over what the system may have thought that it heard. If it sounds anything like this, just assume that we're saying this and not this other thing. This is great for any type of accent correction. I've noticed a lot of times it will say that to is like THIO. It's good for names. For instance, every time I say the word Scott Hanselman or the phrase Scott Hanselman, it always wants to correct it to Scott Handsome Man. Now, I can't promise you it's going to correct things like if you want to talk about, for the NBA fans out there, the quote unquote Greek freak Giannis Antetokounmpo, it's going to have a hard time understanding how to pronounce Antetokounmpo directly from a phrase. That's where a vocabulary table comes in. A vocabulary table is the same as a transcript as a vocabulary list, except for it's a tab delineated text file that has not just the phrase, but a few other bits of information like the International Phonetic Alphabet way of spelling it, which we're not going to get into. It's a lot of Latin and Greek characters that allow you to, or that symbolize different phonetic sounds. It's not how you would think about in like a dictionary. It is a internationally recognized system, which is why Amazon Transcribe and other tools use it. But it also gives you the ability to add sounds like, I can actually phrase it out, and that will increase the efficiency of the algorithm. And then I can also tell it that I want it to be displayed in a certain way. So when I mentioned like Scott Hanselman, I can say Scott Hanselman sounds like Scott Handsome Man, but is displayed as Scott Hanselman. This is good for things like Dunder and Knit or Pi Gotham or request.get. It's not going to know when you say dot, it's not going to say, a period, it's going to say dot. So it allows you to make a lot of assumptions about the audio that you're transcribing and gives you the ability to do that. And there are ways that you can upload these into your Amazon Transcribe system, into your the actual bucket that you're running your transcriptions from. They do have to be in the same bucket that your output is going into, otherwise it will not work. Correction, it has to be in the same region as, it has to be in the same bucket, I'm sorry. And you do have to have the vocabulary defined before you transcribe. You can't do it all in one batch. Now, hopefully I can bring that to you in the future. That's for another talk. I can't talk too much on that right now. But what I can say is there are some inherent problems with this. The way the vocabulary works, everything is a complete overwrite. So it's really hard to update a single object. You have to like overwrite the entire thing, which, I mean, again, we're developers. We can do this. It's possible. But one of the things that I want to work on in the upcoming year is building a repository of recognized vocabulary blunders in the Python space. My goal for this is to use the original transcription and the updated transcription to identify the phrases that are most problematic, to create customized transcription vocabulary sets. So if you have a transcription that you need help with, if you have a transcription that you would like to contribute, if you wrote documentation and you would like a custom vocabulary set built for your documentation, reach out to me. You can reach me using the Twitter handle, send me a DM, or you can email me, kjymiller@gmail.com. Thank you so much. Please, 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 if you're not using transcriptions for your own content, or you're not using transcriptions to help make your content better, at least do transcriptions so that those that rely on them to consume your content have them available to you. Thank you.